Welcome to the Medical Device Made Easy podcast. Here is Munir Lazouzi from easymedicaldevice.com, and today we will help you to validate your software. But as I'm always saying, validation is something that we already talked about. Here we are going to the next level of validation, which will be automation. And we will have some experts again to discuss with us on that, and it's really important to have people that are knowledgeable and that are helping for this kind of subject. And we have today Christophe Girardey and Viriginie Rochat from Wega. So Christophe, Virginie, welcome to the Medical Device Made Easy podcast.
Thank you.
Thank you, Munir. It's a pleasure to be here.
Great. So we had already Christophe before. Now we have a new person, so Virginie. So maybe just for a quick introduction from yourself, Christophe, can you start maybe quickly?
Yeah, for me, very quickly, as you might have seen me already on some podcasts.
Exactly.
So I'm responsible for everything related to quality, regulatory affairs, and validation at Vega. And that's in short about me.
Great. And from your side, Virginie?
So I'm coming from the pharmaceutical lab. I started my career as a lab technician almost 20 years ago now.
Okay.
In a GMP regulated biotech company. But I'm not so much of a routine person, and therefore I switched from QC to R&D.
Okay.
And I worked in drug discovery for the development of small molecules. Later on, I restarted my studies. So as you can see, I really don't like routine. And I did the bachelor and the master in engineering chemistry. And then I came back to my first love, which is drug discovery. But since I started working in lab, I always tried to automate repetitive or boring tasks to get some more time for my brain where it was actually required. And I've always been wondering a little bit why the life science industry was often lacking a bit behind in terms of technology adoption, even though, I guess most of it is coming because of GMP regulations. But so 2 years ago, I jumped on the opportunity to join Vega with the desire to help people to get the proper informatic tools so that they could focus on what they really want to do, meaning lab activities. And during my time at Vega, I grew a particular liking for the automation of the software's user interface testing. It's a technique that is already widely adopted by major regulated industries such as banks, but that is still really not a common practice in the pharma or medical device universe.
Exactly, and it's why we will talk about that today to make everybody discover about this topic. But before to go specifically to automation, I just wanted to remind people about just the basic validation mainly of the software. So maybe we can start with you, Christophe. So when we talk about validation of software, we hear a lot about that. So is this something mandatory, or it's something that's nice to have, or what is exactly the situation for just validation of a software?
Generally, validation is a specific requirement in medical device, not only for the medical device itself. So there are specific norms about testing, software development. If you probably all know the 62304, talking a lot about software development as well about testing. So there are a lot of testing level already described there, expectation in terms of testing. And as well, we talked in another podcast about that, about the validation of software around the medical device, so tools that you use that have an impact on the quality, like ERP, QMS, EQMS, LIMS, whatever you use that kind of an impact on the production or on the quality of your medical device has to be validated. This is stated as well in the 13485. And I think this is mandatory requirement, but generally for me, validation is a lot about good practice when it comes to software development and to software testing. I mean, even in non-regulated industry, you would expect a lot of testing for a lot of maybe business reasons. I test quite a lot. I always take the example about software as a service like Netflix, Spotify, this type of things. They publish quite a lot of releases every day. So you need to be able to have quality and testing to ensure all of that is working. And a last dimension that is maybe important as well, especially in medical device world, is the whole cybersecurity.
Yeah.
You need to test as well that you don't have vulnerabilities, and this is a quite dynamic world where new threats can pop up quite regularly. So it's not enough to test it once, but you need to make a certain surveillance on new possible threats and cope with them. And this comes with as well additional requirements in terms of validation and testing. So.
Yeah, and we are talking a lot about now actually about cybersecurity because there is a lot of connection. We are talking also a lot about artificial intelligence. So there are a lot of things that are also coming there. So verifying that a tool is really working correctly is, as you've mentioned, good for compliance to verify that there is no damage, but also good for the user experience also. I imagine that if somebody starts to use the software and they were not happy and it's not working well, etc., they will give up and move forward, move out of it. So maybe this is also the idea of, as you said, for business reason, to have something that is really smooth and working and not bugging at every click that you are working on. In terms of validation, so now we are clear. So we, as you said, we already talked about that on a previous episode. I will try maybe to put that also on the show notes. Now we talk about automation. So I have myself tried to validate some software. So the idea is that we are creating a protocol where we are saying we should test this, we should test that. I mean, we look at user needs, we look at testing, etc. And then as soon as you get this protocol, then you have to go to the software and start, is the username working? Is the password working? Can I use a different password, etc.? And then you have to iteratively do all the tests one by one and say, pass or fail. And if it's fail, it's a deviation, then you have to do another test to or correct something. So as Virginie, you've said, so it's boring. When you've done it, maybe the first time it's fine, but it's really boring. So
definitely.
When we talk about automation, what exactly are we talking about? Is it like a robot that will be doing that and click on the things by itself, or what is exactly automation?
Okay, so maybe before talking about automation, because there you really mentioned the last part of the testing phase, which is the how the user is interacting with the application. So very often this is conducted with user acceptance tests. But before that, you have a lot of testing that is done already on the code. And for this, to represent a little bit those testing phases, you have the pretty well-known pyramid of tests from Mike Cohn, which is actually a metaphor to think about testing in software. So the shape of the pyramid is to indicate a little bit the effort of testing that you have to put on those different categories. And at the bottom of that pyramid, you have unit tests. So there you will really test small pieces of codes isolated from each other. And you can imagine that those functionalities are really the foundations of your application in the end. So if this is not working, nothing is gonna work properly. So this is why this is at the bottom of the pyramid. And you really have to, I would say the most testing effort is spent already there. So if you have a function, for example, that is summing up two variable numbers, then you are going to check that if you want to sum 5 and 10, the answer will be 15 and not 25.
Exactly.
So this is generally performed by the developers, and it's widely automated since quite a while already. And it's easy to automate this part. Then the second part of the pyramid is integration testing. So there you will combine multiple of those units together and check that they are interacting together as expected. So basically, you're ensuring that the functionalities over all the application are working properly. Like if you're navigating from one menu to another, that you will end up in the proper web page, for example.
Okay.
And then finally, we have what you talked about, which is really end-to-end testing. And there we aim to test the entire flow of the application from a user's perspective. And therefore, here it's including the user interface. So as you mentioned, you can have this scenario of, I don't know, I'm coming on a web page, I have a login page, and I want to be able to put my username, my password, and when I click OK, then I'm entering into the application. So this is for all the parts of testing, but it's true that for us as end users in the lab or so on, we are more involved into those user acceptance tests.
Exactly. I mean, the idea here is that yeah, as you mentioned, so we have multiple levels of development and multiple levels of the software. The architecture is really complex. So the idea is mainly that at each level there is really some tests to be done. So in that case, when we are talking about that, is it like a developer should do the test for the unit, another developer maybe for a group, and the final user for the final test? Or is it like you have different people doing the things, or one person can do all those testing there?
For everything that is linked to the source code, it's better if it's the developers doing it, because you need to know and to understand what the code is doing. So obviously this part, and the end user in the end, it doesn't give a damn about the code. He just want to have a functional application that is helping him in his everyday work or everyday life. That's
exactly it. I'm not looking at codes at all, so I have no interest of that. So for me, it's the final product, checking that everything is working, which is good. But you're right that there are some elements that are underneath of just the user interface that maybe we don't see as a final user, and that can be creating a lot of issues also. So which is really great there. So in terms of automation now, so we talked about the different levels, etc. So can we automate everything, or is there just few of those that we can automate, or can I have? I mean, when we say about automation again, so what are we talking about exactly?
So if we take really the end-to-end testing, so the latest parts regarding the user interface, you said before, you make the mouse click and stuff like this. It's exactly this.
Okay.
So you will pre-program. You will have some developer people that will pre-program the movement of the mouse, the input from the keyboard. If you have an application on the smartphone, you will simulate as well the swipe and stuff like this. So you have to pre-program all your tests, which is in the end your test case. And then when you press on the start button, you can just watch your mouse going and typing, filling in forms, and in the end, it's giving you a nice report with pass or fail.
Okay.
And you can as well compare images. One thing that is pretty cool, you can have the video recording as well of all the testing session. Like this, it can help you as well to understand why it fails, what happened a little bit more in details. You can have, depending on the tool, because you're using tools to automate. And those tools are going to support you to make all those program steps. And then it's simply following all those steps, like click here, enter username, click on the OK button, and stuff like this.
So when you are saying that, it reminds me my study time, if I can say, at the university, where we were using also this, like in Excel table, we have some visual basic things where we are saying, go to this box here, put this number, go to the other box, put this number, add everything together, etc. And yeah, as you said, it's a boring thing when you have multiple lines to do that. So at the end, you say, okay, let's do a macro. We call that macro. So is this what we are talking about now?
Somehow, yes.
Okay.
So maybe we can talk about it in more details later, because you have different types of tools. Okay. And you have some where you will have to really code step by step the movement of the mouse or the interaction with the application. And you have some more, I would say, sophisticated tools that can allow you. You mentioned the macro from Excel. Maybe you remember that you have this record and playback functionality. Yeah. In a lot of tools nowadays, you have as well that kind of functionality. So you just perform your test, you click here, you follow your business process, and the software is recording all the steps and logging them in, and then you can rerun that whenever you like.
Yeah, I think it's one of the things that, as a student, as I said, when we are a bit lazy, we want really to use that to avoid all those things. In terms of automation, now that we understand more about what we are talking about, so there are some obvious benefits because, as I said, when we are a bit lazy and we want to spend time on something else while the test is done. What are the common benefits of maybe putting in place some automation for some of the people that are listening now? What are other benefits that they can maybe tell to their management or people will say, oh, I need to do automation for this kind of software?
I think the biggest one, especially regarding GXP regulation, is really the removing human errors.
Okay.
Because as we mentioned before, testing is, for a lot of people, it's something boring, it's repetitive tasks, and it's very human error prone. Because at one point, if you're spending your whole day testing and entering data here and there, you will end up doing a mistake, or you will forget a step within your test script. Here, once your test script has been developed and you ensured that the automated test script is robust, you're removing all human errors. If you tested the robustness of your test case, you don't have any errors anymore possible. Another great benefit, I think, is because often you have to maintain your test data. With those tools, you can link them, for example, directly to a database. So you don't have to be sure, oh, did I take the proper data as inputs for my test? You just link it to the database, you put in a SQL query to retrieve the proper variables, and that's it. You don't care about it anymore.
You can also multiply the amount of test data, because typically when you have just one user executing a few scenarios, he can only do a few per hour. But if you use automated testing, you can have a lot more of test data injected, right, automatically.
Yeah, definitely.
Scenario.
It will as well provide you immediately with results, which I think is really great. So as soon as the test is finished, you will get the full report. You can as well integrate this with your test management system. Everything is, in the end, at the same place. You can have all the results, all the traceability. What else?
I think it's also very fast, right?
Yeah,
so
yeah,
the
definitely.
main aspect is really that each time you make a change to your software, you can rerun some test scripts you prepared in the past, and this can run every night, every day as you really want to have it.
Yeah. So
then you are
if you're in an agile development software, for example, you can let it run after every build, so or every night or whenever. Once you invested a bit of time early on to develop those tests, then you don't care about it anymore. And definitely, if you're in an agile environment, testing can quickly become the bottleneck of your software development. So because it's taking time to do it manually, first of all, but especially as well because the resources are maybe not available. Especially when you're talking about user acceptance test, this guy, it's not their job. They are supposed to be in the lab or to engineer something somewhere. So you need to add them some workload on top of that to make those user acceptance tests. So you will remove this variable of, are my people that I need to make the test available or not?
Exactly. And so in terms of, as you said, also in terms of compliance mainly, and Christophe, maybe you can answer this one about the automation or thing like that. So it looks like there are a lot of benefits. And as Virginie said, also it's used a lot in banks, but not too much in life science. So how auditors or how authorities are looking at those kind of things? If you start to say, yes, I have made an automation for doing my software validation, will they react like, what are you talking about? Or will they react? And also the question, we are starting to validate.
A good question.
We are starting to validate a software, but have we validated the tool that made the software automated?
Yeah,
so it starts to be like
that's a little bit exactly schizophrenic, or I don't know, a chicken and egg problem.
Yeah.
So you actually, it's not a joke. So if you use such a test automation tool, you need to also validate it first, because this has an impact on the quality of your medical device. If you use now a tool that is not proper or doesn't provide the right results, then you might miss some errors, right? So this is also why you should ensure that those tools are properly validated before you use them. But here we have, you're maybe familiar, Munir, with the CSA guidance from the FDA that was published last year. This is, they are exactly coming from the perspective is, hey guys, you are doing too much documentation and not enough real testing. You are spending much more time to explain what you tested or what errors you had during testing instead of really testing the software. And they also themselves suggested that meanwhile there are exactly those tools around, and it's stated in the CSA that they encourage people to use automated testing to exactly automate some aspects that can be automated. And this is also maybe important. We'll talk about that later on, I'm sure. But what you should automate, not everything should be also automatically tested, right? There are some aspects that cannot be properly automated. But I think this is a clear motivation that the FDA wanted to give, that they say, hey, you spend more time, this is not producing quality to just make additional documentation. So this is, I think, a good help from that perspective. And I think as long as you properly validate such a tool, clearly define also the process, how do you review such a test scenario? You need to ensure that the test scenario was rightly built, right? So that it tests the right thing and that the corresponding requirement is properly tested. You need to have a process around that, or you would do this. But then I don't see any risk in terms of compliance. On the contrary, I think you could improve the compliance, as Virginie said, especially when you work iteratively. You could potentially in every sprint test back, did I have any regression testing prepared? Right now, probably you have a lot of testers doing in every sprint some regression testing to ensure you didn't break some main functionalities that you didn't change. That can happen easily with software. And here you could prove that easily by just running the scenario around that. So.
Hey, just a second. Do you need a EU, Swiss or UK representative? Then choose Easy Medical Device. We can represent you and also become your importer. Contact us at eo@easymedicaldevice.com.
Yeah, and you can as well greatly, I think, increase the test coverage with this. And if you free up your testers and you leave all this repetitive stuff to a machine, and then your guys will have as well more time to do some exploratory testing for or to really test the application from a user perspective, so the look and feel, for example.
So here we talk a lot about benefits. Is there some or disadvantages or mistakes that people are doing when they are going through this automation for software validation?
A lot.
Okay.
I mean, one of the biggest problem I see is that people think about it as a magical wand.
Okay.
Like this is gonna solve all my problems. So one thing to really pay attention to is to not have unrealistic expectations and to put everyone on the same page at the beginning. I mean, a user interface in the end is something quite complex. If you think about all the scenarios, all the workflows that the user could perform on an application, even a simple one, it's enormous. So you cannot test everything. This is just not possible. You cannot test all scenarios. Another common mistake I would say is some people are like, okay, so if we start to automate, let's automate everything. Okay. No. So manual testing is definitely not dead. And you have to leave the machine for what they are good at and keep the human being for what they are good at. As I mentioned before, everything related to look and feel, this is typically for human being. If your buttons, it's stupid, but if your buttons are displayed all over the place and it's taking the user every time 2-3 seconds to find where it has to click, in the end, it's inefficient as hell. But this most likely the machine is not gonna catch it.
Exactly.
You have as well to focus your effort, because one of the major weakness of test automation, I would say, is that it will require greater investment at the beginning.
Yeah, I imagine.
So because you will have to pay most likely a license for a tool, you will have to train your people to use it, you will have to integrate it within your IT infrastructure, and so on and so forth. And definitely developing a test case with such a tool is taking more time than just writing the steps of a test script for manual testing. So, but the return on investment, so yeah, test automation is really good if you need to perform tasks often. So
Okay.
repetitive tasks, as Christophe mentioned, typically regression testing is something that for which you should go for automation.
So in terms of the people that should go for it, if it's a big software, if it has many steps, if it has many updates, many changes, etc., then I think, as you mentioned, investing on test automation can be helpful for the company, because they are not, it's not like they are updating their software once a year and then they have to do once a year the test or whatever. No, here maybe, as you said, Christophe, about Netflix or other softwares, they are maybe updated every day. Every day there are some changes, so every day they have to do some testing. So imagine now that every day you have some people doing that test manually. It can take ages, and then the release of the update can take also a lot of time. So here, this is beneficial. But if it's just a one-time job, one-time activity, etc., it costs too much, I suppose.
Yeah, it's simple. If it's taking you more time to develop an automated test case than to run it manually, don't do it.
Exactly.
It's useless, definitely.
Maybe important to mention is that you mentioned about the investment initially, about training and license and this type of things, but then you can also leverage it for all the cases we talked about. So you can leverage it for the validation of tools around your medical device. So also, for example, if some of your providers, some ERP or EQMS are software as a service as well, so they might also make changes. So you can also make automated testing to verify that your main workflows are always working. So you can prove like that you are not impacted by their modification, because sometimes you are not notified by your supplier that they made changes.
Exactly.
And this could be a way to mitigate that, but also for your own medical device, for SAMD or others, if you change that frequently. And this is typically what happens with software development. You develop new features, develop new functionalities, then you can use the very same tool that you use for this software validation also for the medical device itself. And then your return on investment can be really greater, right? Because the same guys can do the scenarios maybe then. Yeah. And so the training investment is really worth it.
And one point that you mentioned, Christophe, is I think really useful as well. It's some kind of monitoring testing. So as you said, with software as a service, I had the case of a software provider that was doing releases whenever, without release note, without anything. And nowadays, all those software or web applications, they are all integrated together. So when you have such a release, then on Monday morning, you have to connect and check, okay, is this integration with this other web application still working? Did something break? And this can have terrible impact on some companies. So if you can run those tests like every weekend, just to be sure that everything is fine, and especially if you're gonna change your a major software in your company, like an ERP or something like this, the people are always going to be a little bit reluctant, because yeah, I worked with this for 10 years, it was fine, why should we change? And you can be sure that if you come up with a new solution, you implement a new solution, and day one it's broken, and a lot of the activities that people should be able to do on that software, they cannot perform, and they are blocked, and this and this and that, you will get very reluctant people very quickly to your change.
And I suppose that those kind of breakage can also stop a business, stop activities, make people lose money. So then thinking about, as you've said, having this solution of monitoring or automation for verifying that the software is still working well can be a good investment also to have some peace of mind and to avoid some issues, as you said, during the weekend when there is a chance that's happened.
At the very beginning, we talked also about cybersecurity, and you need to have frequent also maybe patching changes, you know, when your OS is maybe, if you use mobile app, iOS or Android or whatever OS you use for deploying your software, there are usually some patch to be deployed to cope with cybersecurity. And each time you do that, you might also break something, so your software might not run as it was before. And this is a typical case where such a regression testing would be fantastic, because then you can also say, okay, I verified the main functionalities are still working, so I have high likelihood that everything else is also working with the new OS version I deployed. So there are really few good reasons to think about that, I would say.
Okay, so now I am really interested by doing all that. It's really great. You sold me something that is great, so let's do it. So where should I start now? I am a company, a small company, maybe of 3-4 people or 5 people with a startup developing softwares, and we have a lot of developments, we have a lot of work, etc. So where should I start? Where should I go? What should I use? I mean, can you give me some advice on that?
So I think one thing that the people are underestimating maybe as well a little bit is the tool selection.
Okay.
Because you have plenty of tools for UI test automation now on the market. They have all their pros and cons, and I would say that you should make a little project on its own to select the proper tool. So set your goals. What do you want to achieve with test automation? And then really assess the different tool and find the one that is really fitting your needs. And as well, if you start to, for example, you have web smartphone application that you're using for patients, for example, to collect clinical data and stuff like this, and that's the thing you want to test, maybe think a little bit longer term as well, because you might want, if your proof of concept, because always start with a proof of concept, if your proof of concept is working, then and you start to see the benefit, you will want maybe to use your tool on other applications with goals that are maybe a little bit different. So try at first to really take the big picture and take some time to select the proper tool, the one that is fitting the needs of what you want to achieve and the need of your team and the skill set as well of your team.
Okay.
I think this one is important. You mentioned about mobile app, for example. This is something that is quite well spread meanwhile in the medical device world. Not all the tools can support that, but this would be quite an asset, because typically if you test for the different mobile phone OS or whatever, this could be quite time consuming. And here you can automate this type of testing as well.
Same for a web application. You have so many browsers nowadays, and they can behave differently. So you have tools as well that are supporting this or that browser, some that are supporting almost everything. So this is really as well things to consider.
And in terms of knowledge from my side, should I be a software developer? Should I understand, I don't know, the languages of programming languages, or what exactly are maybe the best skill or best thing that I need to have to maybe engage with this kind of process?
Good news is, no, you don't need anymore to be a software programmer in order to be able to develop or to maintain automated test scripts. You have different type of tools, as I mentioned before. So you have code-based tools. So for those, yes, you will need programming skills. Definitely, you will need to have knowledge in the specific language that your tool is using. And this is, I would say, the ideal solution if you have complex test cases and you want really advanced automated solution.
Okay.
But since quite a few years already, you have no low-code or even nowadays no-code solutions. So in a low-code solution, you have functionalities like, I don't know, if you want to automate the click, it's pre-prepared. You just say, okay, perform a click. And the only thing you have to tell the application is on which graphical element I want you to click, for example. So it's like if you take in Word and you are changing the style of your title, you're not coding the change. Exactly. You're just clicking on a button and it's doing it for you.
Okay.
So those solutions, so the low code, you can switch to coding again. It's just, it has a lot of built-in functionalities that will help you to develop as well faster, especially if you're no developer. Then you have the
quite similar to the Excel macro we talked about before, because the macro you can record it with the button, but then you can also go to VBA and
code
it again if you want. That's quite similar, right?
Yep, kind of. And then you have the no-code tools. So in those, there is a lot of AI, of natural language processing. I've seen some tools where you are just writing, click on the OK button, insert my name in the text box, blah, blah, blah. So there you definitely don't need any knowledge except for software testing knowledge. And always take a subject matter expert. It's really important to know the application that is being under test and to understand how it behaves, how it's built, how the UI is built, all that kind of stuff. But no, it's really not required nowadays to be a programmer anymore to do that.
Okay. So when I go to Google, should I just write automation tools, or I mean, is there a list of tools that are existing that I can check, or?
There are hundreds of lists. And especially with the latest breakthrough in AI, there are new tools coming all the time on the market. So you have some pretty well-known ones. Then you have to check as well the investment for the license, because you have some open source tools that you can use. Often those are more on the programming side, because they're a little bit, how to say, less complex in total overall. So you have to check with the amount you want to invest as well. But again, as I said before, prepare your requirement for your tool. Select a few tools on the web. Check what is there. Ask some test automation specialists to help you in the selection process, and then check what they're providing against your requirements.
Okay.
One important criteria maybe and we did such kind of benchmark. So we did exactly such an exercise, Munir, but many of them are maybe not so well prepared or not prepared by a developer with the experience of regulated industry. So some of the tools you would have difficulties to validate them or to qualify the supplier, because you would need to qualify the supplier and say, okay, I selected this tool and those guy already is aware of what pharma or medical device or are talking about. So do you have things like, okay, review of test scripts? Do you have audit trails also about who changed scenarios? This type of features might not be always there. And if they are not there, then it doesn't mean you can't necessarily select it, but it might mean you need additional validation efforts or procedural effort to cope with the deficits. And I think this is why it's important really to take the time for this selection process and not just take the first one you find on Google, because usually those are the ones that pay to be the first one to be found, but are not necessarily suitable for you for compliance reasons, for technology reasons, because it's coding, or it's because it's not supporting mobile applications, whatever. So there are many criteria, and I think it's important to take the time to take the right one, because such an investment, you don't want to do it and just regret it after a few months.
Sure. And so if I look for a tool, then should I contact Vega so that you can help me for that?
Yes, you steal my words, but that's exactly, I mean, we did exactly those benchmarking and those selection process for customers to find the right one, adapt it to their specific case. And you mentioned it quite well. It could be also a very different scenario if it's a small startup with really pure software developers. This is a case I see many times, that okay, they are really coders and they fall into the medical device by accident. So maybe those guys would be able to maintain test scripts with coding tools, but they have maybe less money. So there are many criteria to find the right
fit
tools.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So great. So yeah, don't hesitate to contact Vega if you are really wanting to move to this automation. And Christophe, I put on the show notes your details so that people can also go to check that. You talked to me about an article that you have also created on your website.
Mm-hmm. Yes, we just recently published one that I would say Virginie is summarizing more or less what we just talked about today, right?
Okay.
But in maybe more didactic, you can read the articles whenever you want. So You can put the link, I guess, on the show
Yeah,
notes.
I will put that on the show notes. So don't hesitate to go to the show notes to check first Vega and also to get the article which summarizes a bit our discussion of today. And don't hesitate also to contact Christophe or Virginie if you have any question. Okay, so yeah, I think we helped. I hope we also sold correctly the automation for software as medical devices. So I hope more people will be using that also in the medical industry. Which will be helping also to reduce some burden and to make things more correct without human error. So yeah, I hope we will contribute to that with this episode. So thanks, Christophe. Thanks, Virginie, for this, and I wish you a nice day.
Well, thank you, Monia, and have a nice day as well.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Moni. Thank you. Have a nice day.